justifying sending an additional 2,000 National Guard members and the 700 Marines to the scene in Los Angeles today.
Well, it's official. The U.S. Marines have arrived in Los Angeles, but their location is unknown.
President, when is the last time you spoke with Governor Newsom?
A day ago.
And Gavin Newsom is trying to block the deployment of the Marines and National Guard to Los Angeles. Oh, and according to Gavin Newsom, Donald Trump has never called him, and Donald Trump's a liar, yet the receipts have all come out. So we're going to dig into the Marine situation, the National Guard situation, is Donald Trump lying, and what the mission is going to be from here, because it looks like the National Guard is here to stay. Now, before we start the video, please like the video. It is by far the #1 way you guys can help this channel, but it also helps others see the videos as well. It's a massive help. Here we go.
National Guard be in California indefinitely. How long will they be there until you think?
Until there's no danger. It's easy. Look, it's common sense. You ask me that question. When there's no danger, they'll leave.
Okay, so Donald Trump is doubling down on the deployment of the National Guard and the timeline of the National Guard. Meanwhile, Gavin Newsom just posted this. I filed an emergency motion to block Trump's illegal deployment of Marines and National Guard in Los Angeles.
President, when is the last time you spoke with Governor Newsom?
A day ago. Called him up to tell him, got to do a better job. He's doing a bad job, causing a lot of death and a lot of potential death. If we didn't send out the National Guard, and last time we gave him a little additional help, you would have, Los Angeles would be burning right now.
Now, the additional help Donald Trump is talking about are the U.S. Marines. But according to Gavin, there was never a phone call, but the receipts were dropped from the Trump administration.
He said the first call to Gavin Newsom was not picked up. The second call Gavin picked up. We spoke for 16 minutes. I told him to essentially, quote, and this is quoting the president, get his ass in gear and stop the riots, which were out of control more than anything else. This shows what a liar he is. Said I never called. So here is the evidence. And here is the call log that the president sent me from his phone. This was June the 7th. Now, granted, this was on Saturday. But look, there's 1:22 o'clock in the morning. Which would have been 10 o'clock at night, 10:22 at night, California time. There was an outgoing call for 4 seconds. And then there was an outgoing call for 16 minutes. So that from the president, which says is proof that he spoke to Gavin Newsom early in the morning, our time, late at night, Friday night, would have been June 6th, I guess, in Los Angeles. So, Governor, over to you for the response.
I was say that's next, right? We're waiting to see what if Governor Newsom has a response to the president's. Essentially, what he has there is the receipt for what he says is the call that was made.
And if you haven't already, make sure to please subscribe to my channel. This is what we do here. We gather all of the information together and we hold our elected officials accountable. Let's continue. Okay, so that was the National Guard yesterday. They're not like standing around, they're actually having to do some protest and riot control measures. Now, as far as what are the Marines going to do, Stephen Miller actually responded to Gavin Newsom trying to block these deployments. He says federal troops have been sent to physically protect ICE officers from violent and deadly assault. Your lies continue to stoke violent insurrection. So again, this is very important because legally speaking, the Marines and the National Guard, again, are there to defend federal assets. That is the legal basis in which they are in the area. And when you watch the National Guard in action, you can actually see they are embedded with local law enforcement, but also federal agents. That is crucial. These are not lone assets going on the streets as the U.S. Marines trying to capture street corners. No, it is all defensive and a show of force.
Look, that's not my lane. I'm not going to give you legal analysis on whether Gavin Newsom should be arrested, but he ought to be tarred and feathered, I'll say that. I mean, look, he's standing in the way of the administration and the carrying out of federal law, right? He is applauding the bad guys and standing in the way of the good guys. He is trying to, he's a participant, an accomplice and our federal law enforcement agents being not just disrespected, but assaulted.
So, if you're unaware, Gavin Newsom is like responding to all of this. The pinned post on his X page, that's the first thing you see when you go to look up the governor of California. It's Donald Trump calling to have him arrested. But when you scroll down just a few posts, you can even see Gavin wrote, "Good to know we're skipping the arrest and going straight for the 1700 style forms of punishment. A fitting threat given the GOP want to bring our country back to the 18th century. Leave your comments down below how you feel about these interactions."
And that is a portrait of weakness. Right? That is what you get when you have a supposed leader, a supposed strong man even, who can't figure out how to get the support of his people. And he knows it. That is what you get when you have a weak president, an unpopular president who sees the people are against him, who can't defend his actions, who is losing support over time and not gaining it, even on the issues where he thinks he's supposed to be strongest. This is a president who has no other ideas and no skills to get him out of this political pickle that he is in, and who has therefore rushed right to the end and has decided that if the people are against him, well, then he...
Now, I'm sorry, I figured you'd want to know what Rachel Maddow had to say about the deployment of National Guard troops and the U.S. Marines. According to her, it's a weak move, and Donald Trump is a weak man, according to Rachel Maddow. Let's continue. Now, as far as the governor trying to block these deployments, we don't have a lot of information. All he's saying is, I just filed an emergency motion to block Trump's illegal deployment of Marines and National Guard in Los Angeles. Trump is turning the U.S. military against American citizens. We have seen no evidence of that. That's a very bold statement. The courts must immediately block these illegal actions. So, again, from the Trump's perspective, Trump administration perspective, legally speaking, as long as federal assets are protecting federal assets, that's okay. But if the National Guard starts going into the streets and arresting civilians on the offensive, to include the U.S. Marines, that's when you start to get into the gray area. But I do want to point out that's really what the narrative is, that the National Guard is there to provoke and the Marines, and from the Trump perspective, they are there to defend federal assets.
So in 2020, I was a governor of a neighboring state to Tim Walz and watched him let his city burn. And the president and I have talked about this in the past, and he was not going to let that happen to another city and to another community where a bad governor made a bad decision. So Claudia Sheinbaum came out and encouraged more protests in LA, and I condemn her for that. She should not be encouraging violent protests that are going on. If people are allowed to peacefully protest, but the violence that we're seeing is not acceptable, and it's not going to happen in America. This president is standing up for the average American who wants to walk their child to school every day safely, run their small business, and provide for their families. That's the action that he's taken. He has every authority under the Constitution to send these National Guard under Title X into these communities and make sure that operations go smoothly, that law enforcement officers are protected, that they can continue to do their work without fear of being injured or killed or disrespected, and that they can go home to their families at night. So I'm incredibly proud of the president for activating the National Guard and for sending in these Marines, because these Marines are specifically trained to meet the need that we have on the ground in LA right now. And Governor Newsom has done a disservice to the state of California for many years. The people there should never elect him into a leadership position ever again.
Now, there's another part to this story. Gavin Newsom is talking about the mistreatment of the National Guard troops and how Donald Trump is terrible. I'm going to let Ryan Macbeth explain to you why what you're seeing is not that big of a deal.
A guy named Harry Sisson who posted these pictures. California Governor Gavin Newsom also showed these pictures as well, saying here troops have food, fuel, water, or a place to sleep. And this is one of the problems with the fact that less than 0.5% of anybody in America has ever served in the military. Neither Gavin Newsom nor this Harry Sisson guy has served in the military. Let me explain something. Sleeping on the floor like this is perfectly normal. I mean, this actually isn't so bad. It's dry, it's climate controlled, and they do have water. I mean, if you think that's bad, wait until you see combat. I have slept out in the ground, and the snow has covered me, and I've woken up with snow on me. I've fallen asleep in my Humvee waiting for EOD to show up. So odds are they will get hotels maybe eventually. It's going to take a couple of days for the contracts to go through. Until then, they're sleeping on the floor. In all honesty, California National Guard probably won't get hotels The Air Guard guys might, but the Army guys are not going to see hotels.
And again, that's sourced from Ryan Macbeth, and I think many of you know he has a YouTube channel. But again, anybody who's ever especially served in the Army, to include myself and the 101st Airborne, we would have loved that situation. In fact, our leadership would have said, hey, this is too comfortable, we're sleeping outside because we are in the 101st Airborne, and so on. So again, all of those pictures, Gavin Newsom and other Democrats or people who did not serve in the military, they are really getting, hammered on the internet. Now, I really want to hammer this in. In no way, shape, or form are we most likely going to see the Marines involved in anything like this, to include the National Guard. First and foremost, those are not federal assets, that's local law enforcement. But again, all of the clips I have ever showed you guys or reviewed, the National Guard tends to be embedded with local law enforcement or other federal agents. So it looks like they're even being commanded and controlled by assets in the area. And you will not see Marines trying to conquer this overpass to protect the police. This is Hollywood, but at the same time, we're seeing a lot of misinformation that's sort of painting this picture that the Marines are going to conquer LA.
In Slate, you talk about quoting what Donald Trump had said back in 2020 when he was speaking with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. I believe this is in regard to some Black Lives Matter protests that were underway. He said, can't you just shoot them in the leg or something? Expand on why you were fearful at that point hearing that and what you think that portends for now.
I think what a lot of civilians don't understand is the degree to which it's very, very hard to not obey an order when you're in the military. So everyone that's serving has an obligation to disobey unlawful orders. So if President Trump orders them to shoot someone, they should say no. But there's no real mechanisms in place for them to do that. And the pressure in those moments is intense. And so I think our fear is that if Trump issues an unlawful order like that to kill an American civilian or to fire on an American civilian crowd, there's going to be nothing to stop them from that happening.
We've heard reports of journalists and others on the ground being shot with rubber bullets, if you will, although I did read about one reporter, I believe a photographer, who his leg got shredded. Talk about the rubber bullet versus a live bullet. First of all, would Marines be outfitted with rubber bullets?
So a rubber bullet can blind people, can kill people. Even though they are not metal bullets, they can be lethal. They're often referred to as less lethal. The Marines who are going to be deployed will very likely be deployed with, I would assume, normal bullets. The regular 5.56 round that M16s and other weapons they carry fire. In addition, the Associated Press has reported that they're carrying their standard weapons, which would include machine guns, which can fire up to hundreds of rounds per minute. And with police kettling tactics where they kind of condense protesters, if Marines with machine guns were to open fire on that, you could have an enormous mass casualty incident that would surpass pretty much anything that America's ever seen.
Whoever the producer was of that segment, what were you trying to accomplish here? This is embarrassing and so disrespectful to the U.S. military, talking about the potential to fire upon American citizens, and not only that, talking about unlawful orders. I'm just going to continue, but wow, this is a very, very low moment in reporting from MSNBC. This is disgusting stuff, but I'm just trying to show you guys, it looks like the stage is trying to be set for some sort of narrative, what could happen, and then they can say, see, there was an incident that we talked about, but wow, I'm just going to continue.
This is just outside the Edward Roybal Center in the Federal Building here on Alameda, and you can see the more National Guards people have come out, they're holding shields. As the crowd has gotten bigger, and it includes some protesters here down here on the sidewalk. So far we haven't seen any skirmishes or anything like that, but obviously the crowd is getting bigger, and they brought out more National Guards people to stand out here on the sidewalk.
Okay, so this right here is a perfect visual of what to expect with the U.S. Marines. We can see National Guardsmen lined up, but also You can see here law enforcement embedded with them right here. So again, we have a joint operation, which is totally expected for the Marines to be a part of, protecting federal buildings and federal assets, and that even came straight from Stephen Miller. Alright, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Make sure to please subscribe and like the video for more updates. I do think we're going to see some clashes potentially tonight. We'll see what happens, especially if the Marines are going to be around. That is going to be quite the visual. I don't have any visuals for you right now because we don't know where the Marines are, and Gavin Newsom's trying to stop them and block them. So thank you guys for everything. God bless, and we'll see you all later.